Okay, go ahead, Sean.
It's almost there. And we are live. Hey, YouTube, Facebook, how you doing out there? My name is Sean. I am a returning citizen, as you know, or you don't know, but I am. I'm here at Wings for Life International in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in our offices, live with you. I have the founder of Wings for Life with me, and I have a special guest, Shelley Repp from the Dream Center in New Mexico. We're going to tell you all about human trafficking and how you can stop it and how you can be aware of it. But first, let me give you our founder and Edenfield Suite.
Well, oh boy. I just like to say hi and kind of this is Wings Week in Review. And so we want to review all the wonderful things that have been happening this week. We had a great speaker on Monday night. And we had Andy Holton talk about his experience as a Holocaust survivor, how he was taken into a home when he was 6 years old. His parents had to give him up. A Christian family took him in, if you can imagine, and kept him alive. His parents ended up in concentration camps and ultimately were killed. He lost everybody in his family, and he is now a teacher right here in the greater Albuquerque area in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. And what a wonderful, inspiring man. And it was really a talk about Valentine's, about love, the ultimate love that parents had. Can you imagine giving up your child, knowing you might never see him again? And of course, they never did. And then for him to be loved by that family, to be brought in like he was, and to become the man that he is today. And wow,
it's
was powerful.
It's a story with a happy ending. It's so heartwarming.
It is.
And it's on our Monday night Zoom video. It's on our playlist. Check it out.
Yeah, so go see that one. It is very powerful. Now, I'm very excited about Monday night because Darshan Shanti, a man that I have not met yet, but boy, I have seen his information. And is he a motivational speaker or what? We are going to be motivated. Anybody listens to that, we are going to be ready to roll here. And he's talking about life. The title is Life is Like Magic. Now, how do you like that? It only looks difficult until you know the secrets. And in 30 minutes, he's going to give us a lot of those secrets. And a lot of us need to have that knowledge. So we're looking forward to that. We've had our Sean and JD busy working with Wings Works, starting to create a lot of the products and learning how to make them. So if you are out there and you are interested in learning how to do some pottery, and you want to get paid to do it, and you're a returning citizen, wow, we've got that opportunity for you. We always have opportunities here in the office. A lot of people are doing community service with us. We love that. And we are here to help. So you could call us anytime. You could email us. And of course, Sean's going to keep you up to speed. Now, Shelley is one of my favorite all-time speakers ever that we've had at Wings for Life. We're going to have her back again so we can get a tape program. But she is really excellent. And she knows what she's talking about. And she is so caring and really makes a difference in our world. And so we are blessed to have you here today, Shelley.
Thank you, Ann.
So thanks.
You should introduce me all the time.
I got a little introduced for you.
So I'm going to let Shelley take it away, and Sean.
I did my research on Shelley, guys. I'll tell you what.
There you go.
We got 7-8 people in the room.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm going to get to all your questions, all your comments. Please, we won't let nobody will go unheard today. I promise you guys. You take the time to write these.
Bye-bye.
Get you. Let me introduce our guest. Bye. Have a good trip. So Shelley, she became aware of human trafficking way over 10 years ago, and since then she started an outreach ministry for women who worked in strip clubs, and then started a ministry called Spoken For to provide resources and services to women who had survived sex trafficking. Then in 2016, she became part of the New Mexico Human Trafficking Task Force. And then she teamed up and merged with Rob Thomas in the Dream Center, New Mexico. And she's done so much more. And her website is on here. There's a human trafficking hotline number scrolling across your screen now. So we want to make you aware, come up with ways we can stop, ask us questions. And this is a big problem going on in America. And I have a lot to say about it too shortly. But first, I'm going to give you Shelley. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me. I'm just delighted to be here. And it's so good to see you and meet you for the first time. I've met Ann before. And of course, you know, that lady's got it going on. I'll tell you what, you guys run a great program here. And I'm just really honored to be able to be here and share some of what we do with New Mexico Dream Center and what we can do together as a community.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, do you want some stats? How about that? Is
Let's
that a good
start with
place
some
to start?
stats, and I got some questions, and they're personal. And guys, I'm a returning citizen. That means I've been in prison. I'm out now, but it's been a couple of years, and here I work for Wings for Life. Now I'm trying to help the rest of the world, and Shelley's really helping the rest of the world. So let's hear some stats. What's going on?
Yeah. So when you're looking at the state of New Mexico and what's happening with human trafficking, we have some things that are really unique about our state that I think people need to understand so that they can understand kind of what the situation looks like within our borders. So the first thing is we do share that southern border with with Mexico, because we're New Mexico, and with Texas. And that's right where that basically that port of entry is, through El Paso in that area. And so we know with those border crisis and everything that's happening there, we know that there's human trafficking happening in that area. And we see a lot of that immigrant-based trafficking there. But that's not the only trafficking that we have in the state of New Mexico. So if you continue along and you continue up our border with Texas, we share that border. And you know what's kind of happening there between New Mexico and Texas?
Tell me. No,
It's
I actually don't.
not a war over water, which is what a lot of people think.
Because I'm new to New Mexico, so tell me.
Are you? Well, let me tell you. So what it is that's where the oil basin is. So right now, New Mexico has really had, if you've been watching anything with the legislation, we've had a budget surplus because of all of those oil and gas revenues. And so we share that oil basin there with Texas. And so what we've seen, though, is that we have seen man camps that have formed. And so when we've got that, we've seen a lot of human trafficking that's coming in and out of those man camps. So there's another aspect
that's going
of
on in
trafficking.
the Amazon right now in Peru with the gold mining camps.
Yes.
And so prostitution and
right.
They don't care how old the women are.
They don't. And and they're the very nature of being a trafficker is you have to be entrepreneurial. And so they work very hard at finding ways to exploit people. Yeah. And so, man camps are one of the ways that happens. And so we have those two pieces down there. When you come to kind of the northern part of the state, and especially as we get towards like the Four Corners region where you've got Farmington and, that area, you're right there at the Navajo Nations. And so we see all of those native lands that we have and the pueblos and the reservations. And so we have human trafficking that's existing and happens in all of those areas.
On the reservations, too.
On the reservations.
Yes.
They come into Albuquerque trying to escape sometimes, and then they end up in the same situation here. And then here in the center of our state, we have our population center. So Albuquerque holds over 33% of the entire state population. And so we've got a lot of people here. Generally, if there's going to be a large scale event, that's going to happen in Albuquerque. We've got I-40 and I-25 who cross here in our town. And so essentially then what we have is we have kind of that perfect storm for specifically
broken
sex
homes,
trafficking.
teenage runaways,
Exactly.
drug use gone
exactly.
homelessness,
So that's kind of what's happening around our state. We do have some other kind of issues. So New Mexico has, the last time they passed any sort of human trafficking legislation, it was in 2019. So now in the state of New Mexico, if you are under the age of 18, you aren't considered to be a prostitute or a child prostitute. So you can't be arrested for the crime of prostitution as a child. You have to be seen as a victim.
So they finally understand somebody's forcing these kids to do this?
Right, exactly. Because for so long it was a child prostitute and you would just
like the child had a choice and they didn't even want to stop the list and they just arrest. Yeah.
Exactly. So we have that. And then previous to that, human trafficking became an enumerated crime. So that means that people can actually be charged with the crime of trafficking in 2008.
Besides just being a John or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
They can okay.
So
progress is being made.
Progress is being made. It is slow. There's still a lot of things that needs to be made. Yeah. But so that's kind of where we stand when we look at the legislative side. A couple of other things to kind of just talk about when we're looking at human trafficking. The estimate right now based on our population is that we probably have 11,000 or more, but around 11,000 unknown human trafficking victims. And those are all ages. So those are children up through adults. What we do with Dream Center is we really focus on young people. So our laser focus are youth, so teenagers, and transition age, which would be young adults. So kind of up through 25 years old is where our sweet spot is. And so when we look at that and we just drill down a little bit further, we see some really startling statistics. So we know in 2020, our world changed, right? We became virtual. This is why you're doing this. Like I mean, people did this, of course, but it was
not now it's off.
It's everywhere. Yeah, absolutely.
It's a household. Zoom is a household name now.
Zoom is a household name. And so we had, previous to that, we had worked with the ICAC task force, and ICAC is Internet Crimes Against Children. And so that's basically they're investigating child pornography. They're investigating what's called child enticement. And that's when an adult is trying to set up some sort of an encounter, a date, so to speak. I
used To Catch a Predator show. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
And I loved it when they caught those guys.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, so 2019 and previous to that, ICAC would get about 300 child enticement tips, and those child enticement tips tend to point towards trafficking. Well, in 2020, when our world changed, that exploded. So we went from 300 a year in that range to over 2,000 in 2020. So what we saw is as that virtual world changed, the way that traffickers approach children, the way that traffickers recruit, all of that changed as well. And so then we saw this explosion of online recruitment and exploitation.
Online now too, to make it a little more easier. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So we have that. Some of the other stats that we saw is that, so CYFD, which is our Child Welfare Department, Children, Youth, and Families Department, they started screening for child victims of human trafficking in 2019. And so the last figure that we had was 382 basically screens for human trafficking that led to an investigation. So we are definitely investigating child trafficking within our state. And then we've had over 300 with the service providers. We've had over 300 victims within the last year that we've provided services for. Law enforcement is in around the 40 range with pursuing charges against traffickers. So it's kind of just like a little postage stamp size picture of human trafficking.
So I wanted to say something about all those stats. So I have some personal knowledge that doesn't make these stats. So I did federal time. 3 years in Florence, Colorado, southern part of Colorado, in a camp where most people there were from Texas and New Mexico. And half the people in this camp are drug dealers, but not your cartel type, but more the mules that bring things across. And I don't know how many conversations I have with people that told me the money is in the human trafficking, and that there is 100 times more going on than the media says. And these are from the guys who got caught bringing the drugs. And some of these guys had actually told me they sometimes they don't know what's in the truck. And they have got there, open it up, and it's a family, or it's 2 women, or it's 8 kids, and they don't know. And all of these guys just told me this with a straight face. Not even to them, it was cargo. And this killed me. Other guys had told me they opened it up, it was a family. And I remember one guy said, I let them all go. Right. And then he said, I had to look over my shoulder. He goes, I still am. He goes, I mean, I took off and I moved to another state, and now I'm in prison. I'm thinking they're going to find me here. But some of these guys didn't even care. But the numbers that they told me, nothing. When you say, if you say 1,000 kids, it's
probably 5,000,
50,000. Wow. These are guys I heard first. And there's I don't know, JD, if you hear what I'm saying, is that true, JD? If you're listening? Well, anyways, he's been in federal prison too. We can tell you. Now, I can't name names or anything. Of
course.
Because they'll kill me, but no.
We would prefer for you to stay alive.
No, but I don't know any names. But most of these guys don't want to come forward. But I know a lot of people on my channel are getting ready to go to federal prison. If you hear about this, guys, just leave anonymous. Make an anonymous phone call.
You can.
Okay, just do that. I mean, have it in your heart. I know you don't want to, there's certain things you don't say about you hear. But this crosses the line, guys.
It does.
I mean, this could be your daughter, your kid, I mean, this crosses the line. this is where, you know, the prison code's got to go.
Well,
you
and
know?
when you look at that, I totally believe that. And I haven't talked with a lot of incarcerated people, but this is what we have seen, you know, on the criminal side, because we do work really closely with law enforcement. And so you see like things running together. So if you've got somebody who is running drugs, it's pretty much just as easy for them to run weapons, and it's just as easy for them to run people. And so when you're looking at that type of thing, it totally makes sense to me.
They do more time for drugs than they do for people. They do.
Well, and that's one of the problems we have with our criminal code here in New Mexico is that, so one of the forms of trafficking we see exploding across Albuquerque is gang-based trafficking. And this is what's happened is gangs, just like any other kind of organization, they have to create income for themselves. And so it would be that they would create income through the sale of drugs and the sale of arms. But it is easier for them to recruit, to retain trafficking victims, because that's part of that gang life.
It's less of a charge. You get paid more money.
And that victim stays loyal to that gang. So it's to speak out against the gang is pretty much going to be instant death for them. And so they stay loyal. So when we look at that, what you're saying absolutely makes sense, because we in New Mexico do not address this well. We had tried in 2020 to work on some legislation. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to change the definition in the criminal code of a trafficker, because what we want with that, if they are considered
it's rape and it's kidnapping, it's
trafficker,
that's too nice of a term.
It should absolutely be a sex charge. They should be considered to be a sex criminal, which means they'd have to register, which means, you know, a whole different kind of oversight. So in looking at that, we definitely want to see some of those kinds of changes, because these are dangerous people, and they're dangerous for our children, and they're dangerous for children of people who are watching this. The average age of entry, you know, Sean, through federal studies, are 12 to 14 years old. So when you think of a human trafficking victim, specifically a sex trafficking victim, the young people are the ones that are vulnerable. So your life expectancy in that world is in your mid-20s.
If you live that long and your life's ruined for the rest of your life, you're screwed up in the head. You have no trust for anyone human. I'm sure the suicide rate's high as soon as they get a chance. I mean, these kids are sleeping in rooms with 8 kids in one mattress to share, and
it's rough. I mean, it really is. And so there's just a lot of trauma that happens. And so
the psychological,
exactly.
I mean, I thought I had it bad as a kid. My dad beat me and telling me I'm no good, I'm nothing. These kids have it 100 times worse than I do.
It's rough.
And then they're being forced to go get raped and they have a drug and being forced to use drugs. I was telling Shelley, can I tell them the story about the San Francisco?
Please do.
So I was born and raised in San Francisco, guys. I'm new to New Mexico, but I went to Washington Heights out in the Richmond district of San Francisco. It's at least 50% Chinese, Asian, mainly Chinese. And I had a lot of friends that were Chinese, and a lot of their parents were from the old country. And they would tell me about the sex trafficking going on in the Chinatown area and in San Francisco. So women pay $10 or $20 or $30,000 for passage to come to America, with the promise that when they get here, they'll have a job and they can pay back their passage. So they think that they're going to maybe work sewing clothes. They're going to either work in a sweatshop or they're going to work in a massage parlor. So what happens is, and they pack them on freight containers, okay? They're not taking the love boat over here, okay? The slow boat to China thing, they're in freight containers, all right? And when they get here, 30 of them are crammed in a freight container if they survive and make it that long. So then they put them, 20 of them in a 1-bedroom apartment with an overseer. Okay, so if they're pretty, they go work in the massage parlor and they're forced into prostitution. If they're ugly, they work in the sweatshop. I mean, 15, 18-hour days without breaks. Just and if they're young. If the kids, so now they're letting the women bring their kids over here. So the woman comes with her 6-year-old son, thinking there's going to be a better life for her. And when she gets to America, now her son is sold to all the pedophiles, right? Her son is prostituted off. Like if she's pretty, then she's a prostitute. If she's ugly, she's in the sweatshop. And and they never get caught up. They say, well, you owe us $30,000, but we're charging you rent, we're charging you food, we feed you, we clothe you, we hide you from the government so you don't get thrown in jail. They psychologically do all this to them, and it's a nightmare. It's a horror. And I've seen the sweatshops. When I was in high school, I saw a building that people used to come in and out, and I told my father, and I remember he went and he called the police, and nothing was done that day, but maybe 3 weeks later, that the building was emptied out. Now, I don't know if it's because my father called or somebody else called, but this was a sweatshop, and I was so happy that it got shut down. But the chances are they just moved them to another building, and these guys never get caught.
Well,
and that was just in the in the Asian world,
right.
And then I know about here in the Latino world, and
right.
And I mean, white kids too are sold. Hell, they're big money. The pedophiles will pay, about this Harvey Weinstein and all these guys, or Epstein and all those guys. So most of these customers, from what I hear, they're the judges, they're the lawmakers, they're the country club guys. The people that could stop this are actually the customers.
That's what
or it's hush hush, and we don't say anything, or it's their buddies. They all run in the same circle, and I mean, this is a crazy world we live in. And I don't know if I'm getting overexcited and stuff, but I mean,
well, you're definitely passionate because
I'm very
you've seen
passionate.
the reality.
So we need your help, guys. We need your help. If you see a sweatshop, if you see 10 children or women coming out of a house and forced into a van or a car and driven off in late nights, and they come back and stuff, please do something. Don't just sit there and be quiet about it. Make an anonymous call. There's a hotline number going across your screen now.
Right.
I don't want you to get, I don't want them to come after you, but if you see this, you can look for these things, right? Tell people.
Exactly. So a couple of things that we've seen in Albuquerque are ways that it's been reported to us that's similar to what you're saying, because what Sean is saying is absolutely correct. And when you look at the Asian population and the way that they are trafficked into the United States, they are kept in horrific conditions within that, and then they're also coerced. So those overseers, those ones that are controlling them, will tell them things like, if you don't obey me, or if you don't do this, then I'm going to go back, and the person who's living in Taiwan that knows your family is going to kill your mother, or those types of things. And they have no way to know if that's true or if that's not. So they're very unlikely to work with law enforcement, and they're very unlikely to try to find help. So some of the things we've seen, we had with the case of specifically an Asian massage parlor, because those are popped up in every little strip mall that you see, it seems like, around Albuquerque. And so the city council is trying to regulate them so that they can make sure that it's actually massage and not prostitution that's happening. But he's exactly right, is that they'll come in, they'll do a raid, it'll close down, that same shop, so to speak, will just open up in a different location,
under a different name,
name. And so all of them are essentially considered suspect here in Albuquerque. But one of the things that we saw is we had a gal who owned a dog grooming business in the strip mall that she was in. And so she saw something she thought was really odd. She called in, and what it was she said she got there to work really early one day, and this white van pulled up, and all of these Asian women got out of this white van, and they had suitcases and they had cameras, and they were taking like pictures of where they were. They were marched into that Asian massage parlor, into the massage parlor. And she said, Shelley, I think they're living there. She said they do their laundry and they hang it out in the little alley behind the strip mall. And she said they have these like burners and they go out and they cook food in the back. I think they're living in there. And that's exactly what it is that they are kept and they're not allowed to leave. And so being cognizant, if you're a business owner and if you have a massage parlor in the area that you're working in, being cognizant of things that would not seem like fair business practices for you if you were in that kind of situation. We need to also realize, just as you had also mentioned, that brothels are a thing that happens. So a brothel is a home or an apartment where women are kept, and they're basically kept there so that men can come in and do their thing. And so it operates as this brothel. Well, we have seen a couple of brothels girls identified because the neighbors are watching, they're paying attention. And one was in a one of those like extended stay kind of long-term like hotels where you can be there for a month or you can be there for a week or something like that. And there was a lady that was in there on business. And so she had come in, and so she was in, and she had noticed a young girl that was marched into the room next to her, the little, I don't know, sort of room, like suite, I guess.
Okay.
And she said, I never saw that girl come out, and I would see different men all the time in and out, but I never saw that girl
she put two and two together.
Yeah. And so she called that in to law enforcement, and sure enough, law enforcement came by. They did a raid, and it was an international ring. So it was a Middle Eastern trafficking ring that was happening, and they would take residency in these different extended stay hotels and motels, and they'd have a girl in there, and that girl would just work until I don't know when. And so those are the things. We've seen that with houses. So if there's a rental house in your neighborhood, because generally rental houses tend to be
different types of cartels. There's the Russians doing it. There's the Middle East. Different groups are doing this.
And the sad thing, it is. It's huge money,
and it's in demand. That's what drives me. Who would
the
fact there's customers?
Well,
and
when we look at the United States, we have to understand there's 3 different kinds of parts of the business.
I do want
to
get to these comments when we get home.
Yeah. Oh, look at all those comments. No,
but we got some Bonnie's really into this.
Let's talk.
Can we? Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
So Bonnie D, I got you says something I deal with kids from upper middle class families who parents have them legally kidnapped and sent to an abusive, troubled teen industry facility.
So
she's got more here.
Okay, should we just go through all of them, or do you want me to address?
No, address that.
Okay,
let's take them one at a time.
So in looking at, one of the things that I think many people aren't aware of is that when you look at the child welfare system, so she's kind of talking about like a troubled teen facility. So the fancy term for that is, or the proper term would be a residential treatment center, so an RTC. Right. And so within RTCs are in general very poorly run. New Mexico actually doesn't really have RTCs right now, which is causing some problems, but the regulation around them is challenging. They don't pay staff well. And so what ends up happening is you end up with lots of abuse that happens. And so then you have traffickers who are preying on young people that could be at that RTC.
So there's like no Covenant House here. Have you heard of them? Nothing like that here?
Yeah. Covenant House?
Yeah.
We don't have a Covenant House. I love Covenant House. They're awesome. They're amazing.
They don't have one in Albuquerque,
No.
Yeah.
So when we see that type of thing, kind of what's happening is that those RTCs, because of the trauma, all of the stuff that's happening within them, when those kids come out, they are so vulnerable for a trafficker to come in and create that kind of relationship to lure them into trafficking. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we see with those RTCs, is that trafficking can happen within that. In fact, when we look at the trafficking of American children, because we've really talked about like the Asian community, so we've talked about foreign nationals
and South American ones coming through. Yeah,
exactly.
But it does happen to American teenagers.
So here's the startling thing. So I had recently read a DOJ report, so Department of Justice, and they had pulled some stats. And so here's the scary numbers that the DOJ had. They said that 14 to 18,000 foreign-born children are trafficked into the United States every year. So that number again was 14 to 18,000. It's a big number. Yeah. The number of American-born children who end up in a trafficking situation is 100 to 300,000. So American children are being trafficked by foreign nationals, but they're also being trafficked by Americans. And so we have to look at the systems and the things we have within the United States that are contributing to the vulnerability of these children. And what Bonnie's pointing out is that this kind of system contributes to those children becoming victims of human trafficking.
Sure.
So
Bonnie has more, and then there's Frank, and I want to get to all you guys. She says, now when kids escape the legal kidnapping, they end up as runaways and are at risk for getting trafficked. Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
So here's the thing to think about. So especially in Albuquerque has a big problem with teen homelessness. And we have a big problem with homelessness in general.
Right.
But I think what happens is that we're so focused on like the chronically homeless adult population. So that's when we think of homelessness, we think of those adults. Well, there are a ton of kids out there. So the estimates by New Day Youth and Family Services is that there are maybe 5,000 to 7,000 homeless kids within a year that come through Albuquerque because they're very transient. So 5,000 to 7,000 kids within a year could be in Albuquerque. Well, if you think about a homeless adult versus a homeless kid, homeless adults can check themselves into shelters. There's multiple shelters for homeless adults. In Albuquerque, there's 2 youth shelters. They can check themselves in. Kids have to be checked into a youth shelter by an adult or by CYFD.
Well, that's these.
They can't check themselves into a hotel or motel. They can't get food stamps for themselves. So what happens is they have all of these vulnerabilities, and traffickers prey on vulnerability. And that's what they do is the kids end up having to feel like they have to
Here
sell
comes
their body.
Mr. Candyman. I'll buy you clothes. I'll give you some food. Come party at my house. Here's some drugs. Here's some alcohol. And he's so nice to you for what? That maybe that first night, if you're lucky, only that night.
Well, you had referred to Covenant House earlier. So Covenant House did a story of homeless teens, or did a research study on homeless teens. And they came up with a runaway kid will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of being on the street. So if we don't think that there's predatory traffickers on the streets of Albuquerque, then that's bad on us because they're absolutely there.
Wow. Let's get on to this next one here. Bonnie says, some of the kids really do have mental health problems and need help. Others have abusive parents who don't want to parent a teen. It's so easy for kids escaping abuse to go from the frying pan. Yes, I agree.
Well, and here's the thing to think about. Like so part of what we do is we have 4 different programs at New Mexico Dream Center. So we have an aftercare program for survivors of human trafficking. And so that aftercare is transitional living, it's case management, it's emergency resources, all of that. That was our first initial program. So when I started working with human trafficking victims, that's what I started, was this aftercare program. Well, in 2017, Sean, we had 3 young women who are in our program. They were all between the ages of 19 and 23. And so they were technically adults, but they were babies. 19 to 23, you're still a baby.
Well, when I was 19, I knew everything there was to know in the world. You can't teach me anything else. I've learned it all. I remember.
Yeah. So we had 3. In our program. We had more than 3, but we had these 3 in particular. They had all been trafficked as runaway teens. So they were all homeless on the street. Okay. They all had been trafficked from the same freaking corner in Albuquerque. So that's where they met their trafficker. They all had different traffickers, and the situations around how that trafficker approached them and recruited them was different. But because they were homeless and because they were from that one specific area, I'm like, we got to do something about that. So we started our second program.
Weren't you just saying on when you're Central and San Mateo? Is that the spot?
Central and Wyoming.
And
yes.
there's a restaurant or something that they're hanging out at.
Yeah.
What was that place?
Are we allowed to say?
Yeah. Why not?
Are we allowed to say? So there is a McDonald's that's right there on that corner that operates as a truck stop. So it's got like a convenience store, McDonald's, and then it's technically considered a truck stop. So that is, in my opinion, that's one of the most dangerous corners in Albuquerque, but it's also that's our black market right there. So if you want, you can buy anything, Sean. And maybe I shouldn't be telling people this.
Well, wait.
You can buy anything on that corner. So that means you can buy drugs. You can buy people. You can buy weapons. You can buy weird animals, like exotic animals. Like you can buy anything. Because that's like black market area. Wow. So and that's where they were all trafficked from. And so in looking at that, we realized we needed to do something else to kind of address the prevention side of trafficking. So what we did was we found a facility 2 blocks up, so off of Zuni and Central. we have a drop-in center. And so it's kind of like a day shelter, but it's only for young people. So you have to be 21 years old or younger. And so those young people can come, they can eat, they can take showers, they can
and they're safe
connect,
for that
and they're
time.
safe. And they're safe. Our doors are, you have to be let in essentially within there. And so we did that as an answer to realizing that the exploitation of young homeless people is huge. We have predatory traffickers looking for these young people. And so we wanted to try to intersect that. And that's why we started our Harbor program.
Wow. Let me get some of these comments, and then I want to ask you about.
I can just go on for forever.
So Bonnie, she said from the frying pan and into the fire.
Yeah.
Frank, and I know Frank, this got to stop. He's in Tijuana now. I know him.
Okay.
He's from Tijuana.
You're right, Frank. It does have to stop.
And he would know. Frank, being out there in Tijuana, I'm sure you see a lot more than.
Well, and we had a young girl who came to us. So we got a call from the county manager from Torrance County, Moriarty. And so what another really common form of trafficking is what we would call Loverboy trafficking. It's where it's very interpersonal. So it's where a false relationship is essentially built. It's generally an older guy preying on a younger kid. And so she thinks it's cool to have this older boyfriend. Well, what happened was there was a gal from San Diego. And so she had this online boyfriend or this online relationship with somebody she thought was 19. She was 15 years old. And so he's like, hey, we'll set up this date. Don't tell your parents. She sneaked out of her room, San Diego, California, sneaked out of her room and went down the street and met what she thought was her boyfriend, who did not turn out to be 19 years old, but a 30-something male. And he took her down through Tijuana, sex trafficked her across Mexico, came back up through the San Antonio entry point into Texas, New Mexico, and was coming up through New Mexico and stopped in Moriarty. And so they'd had several stops before that, but when they stopped in Moriarty, the way that it would work is he would stand outside the women's restroom while she went into the women's restroom and would use that. And so she couldn't run away because he was always right there. While when she was in the women's restroom, there was a lady in there. She asked to borrow her cell phone. That woman let her borrow her cell phone. And that's when she called, and that's how she was found. Wow. So when we're talking about things like this has to stop, and Frank says that, and he's in Tijuana, this is one of those places where we know that girls are being trafficked into the United States and out. The United States is involved in all levels. We create our own trafficking victims. We import our trafficking victims. We export our trafficking victims. We're involved in all aspects of that. Okay, sorry. Back to all the things, right?
I think we caught out. This is that's spam or something. Let me see if there's. Oh no, we got Bonnie's.
Bonnie, she's like my best friend.
Bonnie, thank you, Bonnie. Keep them coming. She says, as a teen, my family took a vacation to Connecticut, college tour and performance. Our room shared a wall with a prostitute. Called the police, and the cops caught the John.
Awesome. So a John is a slang term for a purchaser. So he's somebody who is actually purchasing the sex from somebody. So that's when she said a John. That's what that John means.
And I know a lot of these prostitutes, they could be 15, 14, these pimps or whatever, and they got them hooked on fentanyl now and heroin and everything else.
Well, and
they're making them drug slaves, and they're forced to do this. And the creepy old men, whoever I'm going to call them, who buy these women, could care less if they're 14, and it could be, that's.
In fact, a lot of times they're actually more valuable if they're younger. So when you look at that, because the purchaser is looking and he's saying, okay, so she's younger, so might have a better time. She's less likely to have STDs. She's less likely to tell. She's less likely to hurt him back or thing, so there's a lot of reasons why they would choose a younger person. And that's why it just is, this crime that it's really against children. And if you look at the federal definition of trafficking, with a trafficker, they say you have to have force, fraud, or coercion. So you have to have force. They're forced into being a trafficking victim. They're defrauded into being that, or they're coerced. They're manipulated into being that. None of those things are applicable when they're under the age of 18. And so if they're under 18, they're considered to be a trafficking victim without having to show force, fraud, or coercion. If they're selling sex and they're under the age of 18, they're considered a trafficking victim. And part of that trafficking definition is talks about what the trafficker does, how he harbors them, he moves them, you have to show that trafficking, because trafficking means you're moving somebody, you're moving a product. Well, with a child, you don't have to prove that with that as well. And so for the federal definition, you can be charged with trafficking as the person who's controlling the situation, that is controlling those trafficking victims. You can also be charged as a trafficker if you're looking at the federal definition, if you are the purchaser. If you are purchasing that young person on the federal level, you can be charged as a trafficker.
So when these guys are caught, though, having been to prison, you make these deals instead of 20 years, you plea out to 3 years. What kind of deals are they making? They shouldn't make any deals with a trafficker, but when they do catch them, are they getting long-term sentences?
They can. So that's why we're.
I know they can, but are they?
Exactly.
I don't mean to be. I'm just saying.
Exactly. That's why we're really trying to work on this legislation, because we do not have a criminal code that addresses this well, and so because of that, it is harder to prosecute, and their terms are shorter. So what any law enforcement who we work with that's involved in this, their goal is to try to make it go federal, like as much as possible, or to layer on as many charges as they can.
When a politician gets caught, or an NFL coach, I'm just saying, you've heard about these,
or a gymnastics coach,
yeah. Somebody, in that, upper class, and they got the fancy lawyers,
and they can walk away from things. And so we've seen sentences from as few as 3 years, and then we've seen sentences. There was a sentence in Colorado that was like 144 years. Like it was this crazy not outrageous, because we're like, he should be put away, but a crazy long sentence. And so, but because New Mexico hasn't addressed this well, it's not written into our criminal code to be able to make it that prosecutors even know what they're asking for within that. It's up to the judge, which means the judge, then if it goes to trial, then that judge gives their directions to the jury. So then it's up to the jury. And so that's part of the problem. That's why we're working on that legislative piece that says this needs to be considered a sex crime, because sex crimes are very defined within our criminal code in New Mexico. So, but sex trafficking isn't defined as a sex crime.
It's like the cruelest thing you could do to a woman or a boy or a girl.
It is. And we have to say, and I'm so glad that you say boy, because what people don't realize is that the majority of the women, you look at it, and it's in between 60 and 80% of trafficking victims in the United States are girls or women. So then that means that 20 to 40% are boys.
Yeah, no, there's a menu for boys. I mean,
it is.
And if you go to the Philippines or some of these Asian countries where,
Belize, you can go to Belize City. Like that is one of the hot spots for trafficking with children. And like you will literally see, you can be in Belize City, and you can see a child walking.
Go to Bangkok and they got 8-year-old boys for sale. It's so.
And they have, and you can do that here in Albuquerque. Like we have seen children for sale off of Central Avenue when we're doing outreach that are boys. And it's because it's a market. And here's the deal: the purchasers of these kids are not women. Like there's kind of this thought of like, okay, so it's a girl purchasing the dude. It's not. It's men purchasing the boy is what it is.
Sure. We got some more here. Bonnie says, I'm going to post a link to this talk on the subreddit Trouble Teens. Thank you, yes, Bonnie. Thank you very much. Frank says, he's got a guy from Tijuana. Yes, lots of young girls come from the South America. I know, and he's got all those and he's talking. He knows because he lives there. Yeah. Thank you, Frank. Thank you for coming forward and saying that, Frank, because I know that's not easy to even admit. And Frank says, yes, they are scared for their families. Yeah, I could imagine. Yeah, we're caught up on the comments, but I wanted to ask you. I saw a movie. I believe it was on YouTube. It was in the Christian genre movie, but it was about it was a trucker that took
Priceless.
That's the one. Priceless. Oh, how'd you even know? I was going to go there. And he rescued the two girls. He spent his own money to get the girl out of the room.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the movie, it says they started a ranch.
So in New Mexico, so there was an organization called Freedom House. And so when they originally were making that movie, so Toya Kaplan, who you might want to have on your show at some time, she
sure.
I was going to say, we can help
let's
make
do
those
it.
connections. So Toya Kaplan had started a house for trafficking victims called Freedom House. It was for adults, so they had to be 18 years or older. And so at the time of the movie, she had just started that. Unfortunately, she was not able to maintain sustainable funding, and so it's not in existence anymore. So, but can I talk about a house?
Yeah.
For a minute?
Yeah. I was going to get
there.
Okay, good. No, I love this. Go ahead. I'm not playing here. Forget this. Ain't no script.
You're so dramatic.
Yeah, I know.
So New Mexico is one of 5 states that does not have residential services for minors who've been trafficked. And so we have felt really compelled that this is in our ethos. This is what we're supposed to do. I feel so strongly about this. And so we've been working on trying to get a house. We've looked for houses and property, and I'm like, we don't have all this funding for that, but how is this going to happen? Well, can I tell you the cool thing that's happened? So so last year, 2021, a family, a married couple, donated a piece of property to us. So they donated a piece of property in the East Mountains, because we realized that trying to have this kind of a house in Albuquerque is not a great idea. We've got too much stuff happening.
Get them.
And so they donated this property, and then they put in the initial infrastructure. So they dug a well for us. They widened the road. They brought power out there. So they brought the P&M, power pole.
So you can be off the grid and everything away from.
Yes. Yep. So they did all of that to kind of prep it for us. And then we did a fundraiser, and we were able to raise like $150,000 to go towards that. And so our goal is to actually break ground in April of this year. So just in case, because this is going to play for forever. So in April of 2022, we are hoping to break ground and then be able to open the doors for minors who have been trafficked. So young people who have been trafficked in September is our goal. And so and you know what? And it's totally got just amazing, because we had, anytime you do something like this, the regulation and the hoops you have to jump through, the red tape, it's crazy. And so I'd had a meeting 2 weeks ago with zoning and planning, and I'm just ready for them to read me the riot act of the 75 million things that I hadn't done and I need to do. And so, I explained what our model was, what we're doing, all of this kind of stuff. And they're all, you're good to go. This is, it's unincorporated Bernalillo County. You're good to go. We're signing off on this. And so, move it on to the next phase. And so then today, I was able to talk to a home designer, because we have to submit floor plans and all of that stuff to CYFD, who will license us. So we have to do that before we build, because I don't want to build and have CYFD go, no, we're not going to license you. And so we talked with a designer today and kind of getting all of that information to them. And he's like, no, we're gonna do this, at as close to cost as we can for you. And so he's putting together all of those floor plans. This is great news. And so we're looking and just seeing some amazing things happen with all that. So we're super excited, because I'm so glad what Toya did and started that house. We're building sustainability into this. So we are going into this with a sustainability plan, because once it opens, it needs to stay open. We can't close the doors on our children. And so we've been working on it for a couple of years. So that way, when it's open, it is going to be sustainable. And
what can people out there do to help? What can Wings for Life do to help? What can I do to help?
Yeah. So one thing is, honestly, even what we're doing today. So awareness is awesome. Being able to talk to people about human trafficking and the reality of what that is in our city and our state.
It's awesome. Not an easy conversation to bring up at Starbucks, but probably needs to be. No, it's
not. We're doing another fundraiser to try to raise another big chunk of money to put towards that. Okay. So we're having a golf tournament on April 1st.
I had the golf tournament. I was going to ask you about that.
Yes, April except 1st. You tore all your notes up.
I don't need them.
Okay, you got it in your head, Sean.
They're just notes, guys. I don't really need them.
I've never been in an interview where somebody tore up the notes on camera.
When I got sentenced in front of the judge, I had a big letter. I said, you know what, Your Honor? Forget this letter. And I just spoke from my heart.
Yeah.
And then it gave me like a year less.
There you go.
I don't know if
There
it's
you
because of
go.
that, but
Yeah. So we have this golf tournament. So if you're a golfer, I want you to sign. Go up. Sean, you're scrolling my website, so you can go and find information.
yeah,
there.
the numbers, their number and the website that's scrolling across the screen. It's also
Perfect.
in the description underneath this video. There's links. They're just push button links. Click it goes right to her website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you want to sponsor, we're always looking for sponsors. So that's something.
Okay.
If you're interested in being kind of a boots on the ground person, or somebody of influence, because what I've seen is how God's done some amazing things where He's opened doors for these circles of influence. So I was able to talk with one of our state senators that are the federal level. So Ben Ray Lujan.
Okay.
And so he, his office had contacted me and was asking about, what does human trafficking look like for children? And so and that door was opened by somebody who was like in something like this, where it's like, oh, well, I know X. And so helping make connections, like those kinds of connections to help us get to the next point. The way we were able to get into zoning and planning so quickly was because it was, I had done an interview, somebody saw it and they're like, oh, I know so-and-so on the zoning commission. Let me call them and see if we can do that. And so looking and seeing those kinds of different circles of influence, that type of thing. If you want to volunteer for us, we have cool outreach. We do awesome outreach and some amazing things.
I think I want to volunteer for you guys.
Yeah.
If you'll have me, I don't know if you allow men to volunteer. Do you?
So
because there's a fine line.
Right.
So there's that trust issue.
Because we have different programs, you would be able to volunteer in some of our programming, but not all of it.
Completely understood.
It's part of it's just part of how it rolls.
I get it.
But yeah, no, you would be awesome with some of like our outreach things, or talking with, we have young people obviously who come to the harbor, and we have guys and we have girls. And here's the deal: like when we look at those young people, they're going to have some choices to make, and those choices are hard because it's like, it is really easy for me to go and sell drugs and sell stolen items and do all of that stuff and live here on the streets. It's easy to do that. You know what's hard is figuring out how to stay in a shelter and get services and get life going in the opposite direction. So hard. When you're looking at that, having somebody who can kind of speak to
I've been homeless on the streets of San Francisco before.
Yeah.
And I've lived in the shelters and worked my way out. I know both of the worlds, so maybe I can, and now look at me.
Look at this.
I have
recruiting Sean.
Let's get back. Bonnie's got a few more here. Bonnie, thank you for all this. She says, wow, supportive housing for trafficked minors. She is a must. She's happy for you too. That's great.
Thank you, Bonnie.
And then she says, why not an art cell?
That could be something. Bonnie, give us some contact information or something like that, because I don't know how to do an art sale. And here's the deal. I don't know how to do a golf tournament. So the way that came about is that one of the churches who has wanted to help us, they're on the west side. They're not close to us at all, but they're like, we believe in your mission. We think this is important. We would like to help you. We don't have a ton of money, but we've got contacts and we know how to do a golf tournament. And I'm like, hallelujah, I'll jump through the hoops to whatever that means. So that golf tournament was started as a fundraiser because a church was like, this is what we can do to help. Right. And so things like when Bonnie's like, how about an art sale? And we're like, yeah. And I'm like, I have no concept of what that actually means. Like, do I paint stuff? Do you? Like, where does the art come from? How does that work? And so that's when we look at this issue of trafficking, and we're looking at, all of the horrible things around it. Our community is stuck in this. It's going to take our community to get us out of it. And so looking at people who are, interested and see that there's value in seeing this as a community project. Like, it's more than just me getting on and talking about the realities of trafficking. It's people deciding that they don't want this in their backyard. It's people deciding that they're going to support efforts to provide awareness, to provide services. And so it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me.
I mean, also this goes on in suburb neighborhoods. There's certainly safe. They probably call them safe houses, but we know I don't know what the term is, but
so we would say safe house, even though there is no such thing as
no
a safe
such
house,
thing. But you can look for those in your neighborhood, right? That's the house for nobody's. One car pulls up, people get out.
Oh, are you talking about a
sex traffickers? the hiding houses where they keep the kids and the girls, stash houses.
There we go.
Yeah. Those are found in suburb neighborhoods.
Well, so here's
all over, really.
Here's the thing. This is how close it is. So I live over kind of near a park, just a little. I don't live far from here. I live just a little bit east of here,
okay.
And super close to a park. So we had law enforcement refer a gal who, was a trafficking victim. And so we were providing services. And then our case manager was sitting with her as she was doing the interview with law enforcement and all of these different kinds of things as they're trying to make this case. Well, where she was kept was 2 blocks from where I live. Where I walk my dog at the park, I walked by that stash house
and why am I not surprised?
3-4 times a week in my neighborhood. And guess who their next door neighbor was? Their next door neighbor for this house is a BCSO deputy, like an officer. And so
and he had no
clue. And BCSO is Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office. Yeah. So like that, like there were all of these things. And I've been working with trafficking victims for all this time. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so when we say it can happen anywhere, it legitimately can happen anywhere, including right next door to a law enforcement officer.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, Bonnie's got a few more. You can hold a silent auction as part of the golf
that's
tournament.
That's a great idea. I think we are looking at a silent auction and a raffle, something like that. So if you have connections to like maybe you're an artist, I don't know, Bonnie, or have connections with something like that. Again, we would love to be able to see how we might be able to use that, to be able to do that. That'd be awesome.
All right, Bonnie's got 3 more. All
right.
Oh
my goodness, Bonnie.
You generate interest amongst local artists, ask them to donate a piece.
Okay.
Run a rubber chicken dinner and do a silent auction.
Thank you.
Okay. And she says, I've raffled off art for fundraising for a soup kitchen. So the soup kitchen could have a surprise special cookout dinner. Bonnie, we may need you. Are you local, Bonnie?
She's like going to be our fundraiser.
I know she may be local here.
Maybe.
Many artists are willing to donate a piece to a good cause. Of course they are. I've been kit up for pieces. And we have artists amongst our Wings for Life. We've got a Wings work program we're working on now just for artists. With the clay ceramics.
Yeah.
And that. Yeah.
Well, that's what I heard Anne talking about that when she was first here. And she's like, if you want to do pottery and then just being here in your space, I see some pottery that makes
we have art all over this place. And I know I could talk Anne into donating some of this for your cause because we can't store it all. So, right? So, we can help you out
Anne,
too.
We're coming for your art.
And I am an award-winning hand knitter in Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
Oh, she's from Boston. Okay.
That's really cool. We got somebody from Boston.
All over the place. Yeah, Tijuana, Boston. I know there was Alan there. He's from, where's he from? I can't remember. I want to say Michigan. Yeah.
Okay.
But they're from all over.
Awesome.
So.
That's awesome.
Any more questions, guys? Comments? What's our time like? Well, we've been about an hour. I think I don't have any more notes, questions, but I think I covered a lot. I think so. Any last words for people?
Well, I would say that, which we kind of already talked about, is that if you see something that looks suspicious, especially if you think it has to do with a child, take action. Like call 911. Call for us here in New Mexico, you would call Pound Safe. That's the child welfare department. So it's going to be different for different places, but you want to call those numbers. This is how we protect our children, is when we decide that that the life of that child is important enough and valuable enough to make that uncomfortable call, and really pay attention to who your neighbors are. I mean, when I just talked about how a trafficker was stashing women next door to a local law enforcement officer, like that's a big wake up call for all of us, that we need to be good neighbors, that we need to be friendly with the people we know around us and pay attention to those kinds of things. Yeah. That's what I would say, is just really be aware. It's not hard. It's not hard to see once you start looking.
Right. I did make a mistake once. There was a lot of women that lived across the street at this one place. They would come in a van and they would go in the house and they would leave. Now, but we found out later this was a clean and sober living house for battered women.
Oh.
And we talked to a police officer about it.
Yeah.
And he knew what it was. He's no, you guys have the wrong idea. We're glad you're watching now.
Yeah.
But that's and please don't tell anybody where that's. So, you know.
But you know what? But I'm so glad you did that, Sean, just even in the sense because that means you were cognizant of it.
Yeah.
You were like, this doesn't look right. This isn't fitting within
Something
the
didn't look
normal
right,
things.
you know. Yeah.
And I think that's good because it worked out, obviously, that was a great resource for those women, but it might not be like that another time.
Yeah, and you never know. But you don't know until you might be saving somebody's life. Instead of looking the other way, keeping quiet about it and going on with your life, just think of what that person might be going through, and you could be the one to save their life, you know, because there's that suspicious house. There's something going on. If you have to ask the question, you know what I mean? Maybe, you know, at least pray on it.
Yeah, I think it's good, especially if you think a child's involved. Like when you think if there's a child that's involved, then it's worth the effort to make the phone call.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming out. Thank you. Guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe, hit that like button. Next week, I got Stanley Weinstein from Best Chance. So they help people right out of prison. They'll help you get a job, a driver's license, a place to live, all that stuff. See us next week, Friday, 3 o'clock as usual. Thanks for watching. Love you. And thank you.